we have anyone else coming in? Good afternoon, and good afternoon and welcome. It's great to see a good turnout for this afternoon's event on innovative technology in marine biodiversity and sustainable fisheries, lessons from USAID's ECOFISH project. I am Roger Mark D'Souza, and I direct our programs on global sustainability and resilience here at the Wilson Center. And as someone who is from the islands, I'm always very excited when we have opportunities of innovation and learning coming from an island setting that we can share with others. So I'm particularly excited about today's event. And in fact, I was telling some colleagues about this, and they said to me, we need this in the Philippines. And I said, this is from the Philippines. So it's always good that we have this opportunity to share these lessons, not only among our Washington, D.C. community, but our partners in the field and across the world. So those of you who are not very familiar with the Woodrow Wilson Center, we serve as the living memorial to President Wilson, bringing together the worlds of analysis, policy, and direct programmatic application. And we're quite thrilled that we can be working with our partners at USAID, at Tetra Tech, and the partners under the ECOFISH project. So I think we're in for a very interesting discussion this afternoon, and the reception and further discussion over the reception. So I'm going to hand it over to Jan Oman, who's the president from Tetra Tech and their International Development Services, to frame this afternoon's discussion for us. So, Jan?
Thank you, Roger Mark. And on behalf of Tetra Tech, welcome to everybody today's very interesting session. Today, we celebrate a 20-year legacy of preserving the Philippines' most valuable resources, its precious and unique marine biodiversity, the amazing people who manage, and the fishing communities who derive sustenance and livelihood from them. Today, we celebrate the government of the Philippines and its partnership with USAID's ECOFISH program. And today, we celebrate receiving the prestigious Concordia P3 Award presented by Secretary of State John Kerry just last Friday in New York City to the ECOFISH project for innovative partnerships and technology that are transforming sustainable marine biodiversity, conservation, and rural livelihoods in the Philippines. By way of introduction, my name is Jan Oman, President of Tetra Tech International Development Services, and I'm honored to welcome today's program entitled Innovative Technologies in Marine Biodiversity and Sustainable Fisheries, Lessons Learned from the ECOFISH project. Tetra Tech is proud of our 20-year legacy serving as an implementing partner for USAID and for the government of the Philippines and USAID's coastal marine resources management initiatives over those 20 years. We are honored and privileged to have with us today to share valuable lessons from the ECOFISH and to provide details on the recent P3 award for TV white space. And I'm going to share explaining that concept to my dear colleagues, Nigel and Becky and others. So we are honored today to have with us Gloria Steele, Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator, Asia Bureau, and former USAID Mission Director in the Philippines, so very near and dear to Gloria's heart. We also have Becky Gibb, Development Specialist from USAID, and we have Nigel Armada, Tetra Tech's Chief of Party for the ECOFISH project. We also have Joseph Foltz, USAID from the Strategic Communications Office, Legislative and Public Affairs Bureau, and former Deputy Director of the Environment Office at USAID of Philippines. So we have a real Philippines mafia that we've brought together here today. Before I introduce our next speaker, I want to acknowledge the many partners who have contributed to make ECOFISH accomplishments what they are today. They include the Government of the Philippines Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, the Department of Science and Technology, of course, USAID. I want to acknowledge SSG advisors who advised us on this breaking technology, to Microsoft, who led us down this fascinating adventure as far as how to harness TV white space, and the many, many local, literally hundreds of partners that we work with throughout the Philippines. And also we want to thank our host, the Wilson Center, for welcoming us today. So now, on with this celebration of breakthrough and of inspiration and transformation. So let me turn today's program over to Gloria Steele, Senior Deputy Assistant Administrator, Asia Bureau, and former USAID Philippines and Pacific Islands. We're keeping with an island theme today. Mission Director, who is well acquainted with this project's goals, challenges, accomplishments, impact, and future. Gloria.
Thank you very much. It's too high. There you go.
Okay.
It's okay. Thank you very much. I'm really excited to be here today and really want to thank all of you for joining us. I still have get used to being a former mission director and senior deputy assistant administrator. I've been in this job for 2 weeks. And I'm really happy to be here because I do still have connections to the islands. And thank you to the Wilson Center for hosting this event. I do also want to acknowledge Rolf Anderson. I believe ECOFISH started under his directorship of the Office of Environment, Energy, and Climate Change. So Rolf Anderson is here as well. You know, the Philippines has been working very hard over the last 5 years to accomplish as much as it can in order to create an environment for more inclusive and rapid growth. And it has achieved doing that. Over the last years, growth rates have gone up phenomenally and on average. However, everyone knows in the Philippines that a lot more needs to be done. The average rate is not actually equally spread out throughout the country. Growth has been much higher in the urban centers, particularly the Metro Manila area. 62% of growth in the Philippines is generated in the Metro Manila and surrounding areas. And the rest of the country is still poor. 20% of the population of the Philippines still lives in poverty. And the poorest members of the society in that group are the fisher folk and people who grow coconuts. But and so the work that ECOFISH is doing is really important. It is important in achieving the inclusive growth, its success in contributing to the inclusive growth that the Philippines is trying to achieve, I think is really important. And I congratulate Becky and Nigel, the ECOFISH project, Tetra Tech, and Microsoft for making the fisher folk better connected in particular to technology that otherwise would not be available to them. You will hear more about what the TV White Space has done, but in summary, briefly, it is trying to get the people who are not connected have access to internet services that will enable them to be registered and be included in the group that receives the technical assistance and inputs that are necessary to lift them out of poverty. And that's why this project and the particular award that ECOFISH received recently is very important. If successful, and spread throughout the country, the issue of poverty may be addressed, will be addressed. The elusive dream of eliminating extreme poverty, at least in the Philippines, will be achieved. if fisherfolk are able to be included in the growth process. Becky and probably Nigel will talk more about what the ECOFISH is doing and what the TV white space technology has been able to accomplish. But this has been a very interesting project for us, and Rolf was part of the design of this project that tries to conserve biological diversity, enhance ecosystem productivity, and improve the productivity of the fisherfolk through the technologies that they are introducing. In other words, it aims to address the issue of poverty in the country, and through including fisherfolk to be registered and to be reached. And in fact, 1 million fisherfolk have been registered to date, and over 200,000 of them have are living in remote areas and have been reached. The objective of the project is to increase fisheries biomass by 10% and to increase the number of people whose lives will be improved, number of fisherfolk whose lives will be improved through this project. I think it's an ambitious goal, but I have every confidence that the project will be able to achieve that. Of course, what will enable the project to achieve this are the people behind the project. Nigel and Jerry Sylvester before him, and of course Becky, who provides the day-to-day oversight of this project. We are very proud of our partnership with Tetra Tech and of the leadership that Becky has given ECOFISH project over the years. So it is a great pleasure and honor for me to introduce Becky, who is going to be the next speaker. Becky has been working in the fisheries sector over the last 20 years, and in that 20 years, 6 years has been spent in USAID. I had the privilege of working with her in the 5 years that I was assigned to the Philippines. She manages the ECOFISH project for USAID and has been involved with the Philippine and Southeast Asian Regional Fisheries Co-Management and Sustainable Livelihoods Program of the UN and FAO. Mouthful. She is also a senior instructor in community development at the University of the Philippines, which, if you know the Philippines, is the most prestigious university in the country. She has a master's degree in marine management from Dalhousie University in Nova Scotia, and lives in Manila with her 10-year-old daughter. So without further ado, Becky, you have the floor.
Thank you, Gloria. I'm so happy to see you again. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you today our work on sustainable fisheries management. Can you see the... So let me start by saying that fishing is not only an industry in the Philippines. Fishing for Filipinos is a way of life. So it's very important. Unfortunately, over the last few years, or maybe not few years, but in 1990s, we have seen increasing scientific evidence, community narratives, and personal testimonies on the decline of fisheries and overall coastal resource management degradation. Only 5% of our coral reefs are in excellent condition. Our mangroves have declined from about 500,000 hectares in the 1920s to about 120,000 hectares in the 1990s. The Asian Development Bank reports that we are losing, the Philippines is losing about $120 million in economic benefits every year because of coastal and marine degradation. And the main reason for this degradation is overfishing and overcapacity. And so, whoops, wrong press. So degradation hits hard on fishers. This is old information, but I included it in my presentation because I think this is nodal point. In 1997, the Philippine Bureau of Fisheries summarized the production data of fisheries from 1950 to 1994. And during that time, already telling us that there's a sharp decline in marine fisheries production. And in the Philippines, where fish provide more than 50% of the protein dietary requirement, that spells disaster. And for the fisherfolk who rely on the ocean for their subsistence, that's really a disaster. 1.7 million municipal fishers. That's an estimate. It could be more because we're just starting a database, as Gloria mentioned, starting a database to register the fisherfolk. But 40% of the 1.7 million fishers are living below the poverty line, earning about $4 or less in a day, catching about 3 kilograms of fish in a day. So if we wanted to respond to the situation of extreme poverty, sound ocean management has to be done. Because in the end, the culprits or the victims of degradation are the extreme poor, which include the fisherfolk, in this case, in the Philippines. The Philippines is also the third in the world at most risk of climate change. And we are also highest in terms of vulnerability to tropical cyclones. On the average, we are getting about 20 storms in a year. And in the recent years, we are experiencing increasing frequency and severity of these storms. I just got out of Manila when a storm was coming in. And so we're used to it, but it's increasing every year. The topmost picture, if you can see it, is a picture of an island community right after Haiyan struck in the Philippines in 2013. Haiyan affected 16 million people, killed 16,000 people. Roads, houses, fishing boats, fishing implements, they were all affected. The one in the middle is a picture of Bohol, province of Bohol, right after a 7.2 magnitude earthquake struck the province, hit the province in the same year, 2013. That is a newly emerged foreshore land. I think it's about 12 kilometers, 200 to 250 meters in width, but that just shows you that something like an earthquake can easily change geographies and physical terrains, which would change the condition of your resources. The photo at the bottom is a warning for a tsunami in an island community in Mindanao. So climate change and natural disasters, they exacerbate the degradation or the degraded resources of the resources. So within that context, USAID operates, and we partner with the Philippine government in its quest for a more stable, prosperous, and well-governed Philippines. We have 3 development objectives. Gloria knows this by heart. We have developed these objectives under her leadership. First is on accelerating and sustaining broad-based and inclusive growth, improving peace and stability in conflict-affected areas in Mindanao, and improving environmental resilience. Sustainable fisheries management contribute to the 3rd development objective on environmental resilience. Oops. Okay, so over the years, the US government is a committed partner to the Philippine government in its quest to protect its unique marine biodiversity. And to date, USAID has invested more than $46.5 million in marine biodiversity conservation in the Philippines. In our journey towards sustainable fisheries management, we came out with these 3 key areas of work. The first one is on strengthening partnerships and shared platforms on sustainable fisheries management. No one community or local government can do fisheries management on its own. It has to be a collaboration of the different players within the fishing industry and within the fishing sector. I think the Philippines has a very conducive policy environment for this collaboration. The Fisheries Code of 1998 has language that talks about alliances of local governments. And this is something to move it forward. It has to be strengthening partnerships and shared platforms on a shared resource like fisheries. The second is improving science, ecosystem science, research, and management through increased support from universities and NGOs. Our universities have done a lot to support fisheries management in the Philippines. One of the very first marine protected area, Apo Island, was supported by a university called Siliman in central Philippines. And that marine protected area has been a model for most MPAs in the country. The picture at the bottom is a handshake among different key officials of the University of the Philippines and USAID. Because recently, with USAID assistance, University of the Philippines has set up a new graduate program on tropical marine ecosystem management. It is a 1.25, it's a 1-year, 1-semester professional master's on tropical marine ecosystem management. And the audience is not just Filipinos, but the Coral Triangle and Asia region in general. The third is on expanding incentives and advocacy for conservation, including increased private sector involvement. And this is where I think we need to pave the road, because the private sector involvement, we still need to increase it and encourage it, and it's just starting. But I think a lot of avenues have been created already. And the mention of the TV white space is one such partnership. I will explain later in the next slide. And so the ecosystems improve for sustainable fisheries. This is our current banner program on marine biodiversity conservation. It is a 5-year technical assistance, a partnership between USAID and the Philippine Bureau of Fisheries. I think it was mentioned that its goal is, first, a 10% increase in fish biomass over a period of 5 years, and a 10% increase in the number of new or better employment from sustainable fisheries management. And there's a reason why it is designed that way. When we started with when FISH project ended, FISH project was able to demonstrate that given a set of measures with a specific approach, you can actually reverse the decline in fisheries. Because the FISH project was able to demonstrate over a period of 7 years from 1994 that they were able to increase fish biomass by 13%, way beyond the 10% target, on the average across 4 areas in the Philippines. When we design fish, Rolf knows this, when we design fish, we said we should build on that success and continue with that target. But there was a lesson at the end of fish, because even if we did helped increase the fish biomass, the benefits from that increase were going into the bigger, the more efficient, and sometimes illegal fishing gear. And so something has to be done with that lesson. And so we said we should include the socio-economic part in the target of the next project. And so that's why we included the other 10% for ECOFISH. So we are now midway with ECOFISH. I'd like to show you this picture. This is in Coron. If you've been to Coron, it's one of the most beautiful places in the Philippines to dive. This is inside a marine protected area called Siete Picados. That's Jojo Marso. He is a manager, a very hardworking manager of the Siete Picados Marine Protected Area. And Siete Picados is an award-winning MPA. It's been awarded to be one of the 10 finalists of the Galing Puok Award, or it's a governance award nationally competed in the Philippines. But 10 years ago, that MPA used to be a dumping ground of trash in Coron. Now it's one of the top tourism destinations in the province, earning about 1.3 million pesos in revenue in 2013. This is a technology, a partnership between the provincial government of Tawi-Tawi, the Philippine National Police Maritime Group, and a telecommunications company in the Philippines called Smart Communication. Smart Communication, the private sector company, has a technology on SMS broadcast facility. 700 daloy, or 700 dedicated alert lines for ocean biodiversity. I love that acronym. And daloy in the Philippines means to flow, such as the flow of communication. 700 daloy is an SMS hotline for reporting violations to maritime laws. You can call anonymously. The text message is received in a hub at the PNP, the Philippine National Police, and it goes to the appropriate agent or institution to respond. When it was implemented from May to December in last year, 2014, our target was to receive 700 texts. Why not? It's 700 daloy. Let's target 700 text messages. We received more than 3,000 text messages. And each one text message is cost 1 peso. So a citizen pays 1 peso to report a crime, a maritime infraction. That's good citizenship for you. But we received more than 3,000 text messages, leading to 25 arrests. And the total value of those arrests is something like $135,000 by the Philippine National Police. 700 daloy is piloted in Tawi-Tawi and is planned to be scaled up for the rest of the country by the Philippine National Police. Right sizing, that's a concept being forwarded by ECOFISH and Tetra Tech. I will ask Nigel to explain the technical part of the right sizing, but basically what you're seeing in this picture is fish examination. And right sizing is basically just looking at what would be the appropriate management measures that will address your overcapacity and overfishing problem. The reason why we're here, we came from New York because of the P3 Impact Award. TV White Space in the beginning was a partnership, I would have to be frank, that we thought was, I don't know. There was no policy in place and you don't know what to do with it. What are we going to do with it? But then came the National Fisherfolk Registration Program of the Bureau of Fisheries, and it was a perfect match because half of the problem of registration is connectivity. There are so many fishing island communities that are not connected. And so we sat down, redesigned, talked about it a little bit more, and the partnership was born with Microsoft, with the Department of Science and Technology, and the Bureau of Fisheries. TV White Space are the empty spaces in your television that's turned into internet, into Wi-Fi for use. And in the Philippines, it was deployed in 6 municipalities in the province of Bohol for 6 months to test the bugs of the technology. But at the same time, it was used to register the fisherfolk put into a database. I told you there's 1.7 million fisherfolk. Before the Fish R program, only 5 or 10% of the fisherfolk were registered. A year and a half after Fish R was put in place. 1.5 of the 1.7 million fishers are now registered. That means they would have better access to government services, health, insurance, poverty alleviation funds, and calamity funds in cases of disaster. The technology, it was able to show after an evaluation after the pilot in one of the municipalities in Bohol where in its deployment, we have seen that broadband is still the king. Everyone is still using broadband. There's access to broadband, and broadband is it. But in places like island municipalities, like in one municipality in Bohol, where there's no broadband, TV white space was used to register 4,000 fisherfolk. And aside from that, when we first deployed TV white space in Bohol, 2 months after the earthquake struck the area, and post-earthquake, the TV white space was the only working means of communication. So the TV white space helped, in many ways, helped save lives in Bohol as well. So that was the impact that was not intended, but we saw when we implemented it. So I'd like to end there because when I thought about the presentation, I titled it Philippine Journey to Sustainable Fisheries. I should have said a continuing journey to sustainable fisheries management because the road does not end here. We are still continuing, and if there's one thing that I really learned from my former mission director, Gloria, you should not be complacent. You should always try to see and search for how you can do things better. And that's what our EcoFish program is doing and will, I hope, continue to do. So thank you very much.
You want to take this with you? Yeah, wow. Thank you very much, Becky. Very impressive, very exciting. So I'd like to just say a few words about Nigel as I introduce you to him as he gets ready for his presentation. So as we were preparing for this event, I was telling Nigel a little bit about the work the Wilson Center has done in the Philippines on integrated coastal resource management. We have a long-standing partnership with a number of partners there. And I was telling him that one of my favorite places in the Philippines is Iloilo. And Nigel said, I'm from Iloilo, which is great. So Nigel is from Iloilo. He's a fisheries biologist, as you can see from his background, with 35 years experience in fisheries resources assessment and management in the Philippines. More than 25 years, he was a faculty member of the College of Fisheries and Ocean Sciences at UP, University of the Philippines. And as you will see from his bio, he's done some work on the Ivory Coast, looking at assessment on tuna, and has worked in a number of neighboring Asian countries. Becky mentioned the FISH project. I'm not sure that everyone is familiar with it, but he served as the Fisheries Management Advisor on Tetra Tech's Fisheries Improved for Sustainable Harvest project. So that's the FISH project that we heard about that was so successful. So Nigel, we hand it over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm really accustomed to talking before students, and it's my second time in speaking in this institution. I was here before about during the FISH project. We were also allowed to speak before a big audience, but I still get butterflies in the stomach. So let me start with. This is about I'll put in some details on what Becky has mentioned earlier, also some gaps that I may have to fill up and what she had mentioned earlier. So talking about EcoFish. So as mentioned earlier, EcoFish aims to improve management of important coastal marine resources and associated ecosystems that support livelihoods and economies. That's a broad goal for the project. It is designed to, in best places here, conserve biological diversity, enhance ecosystems productivity, and restore the profitability of the fisheries. Now, we are in 8 marine key biodiversity areas in the country. We have a lot of biodiversity areas, but these 8 marine key biodiversity areas, or we call MKBAs, represents the 6 marine ecoregion in the countries. So basically, in the design of the ECOFISH, it tried to more or less represent all these marine regions such that it could be also representing the entire country. Now, so it is a 5-year project implemented together with the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources of the Department of Agriculture. And of course, we also partner with other institutions like the Department of Environment and Natural Resources, and practically also with the Department of Interior and Local Government, because mainly, most of our partners with whom we implement the activities on the ground are practically the local governments. So the Department of Interior and Local Government is also one of our major partners. So it builds on the former project, which was mentioned a lot earlier about the fish project, builds on the lessons learned from that project, as well as also from the other gains from that project. That project was able to prove that fish decline can be reversed or even arrested or reversed with proper management. It was also learned that the key element of that is governance. It means good governance from the municipal governments that we're dealing with. And we also, in this project, initiated the ecosystems approach to fisheries management, or what we commonly known now as the EEFM. So that project somehow was, in a way, experimenting on how EEFM is going to be rolled out on the ground. And we have learned a lot from that. Now, what is key is that what Becky also mentioned earlier is that that project was able to achieve a 13% increase in fish biomass as measured through the 4 project sites on the average. Unfortunately, this increase did not redound to the benefit of the people who need it most. Let me show you the details of this slide. Now, I found out that in this particular area, one of the 4 areas where we were, there was tremendous increase in the harvest, as well as, of course, the annual values of the harvest from 2004 to 2008, and this was measured further until 2010. Now, all the 4 municipalities where we were in, all have experienced or have these increases. Now, however, if you look at that, now, there is supposed to be an increase of 76% from that 2004 to 2008 in terms of harvest, and that is equivalent to 19% per annum. Huge, assuming that from our population's point of view, this is really a very, very good result of any project. But looking at the details, which Becky already alluded to earlier, is that we have winners and we have losers in that increase. Here, the increase in harvest benefited a number of fishing outfits. That includes also illegal fishing outfits. This also included those fishing gears that require a lot of investment. That means, and if you look at below, the losers are really the fishers that we want the project to have or to gain from the project. These are the fishers, the small-scale fishers, doing the multiple hand line, doing the crab pot, doing the bottom set long line or the bottom set gill net. So these are the losers. So in effect, the project was able to result into a gain of biomass as well as a gain in harvest, but unfortunately, it went to the wrong people. That's why I am glad that during the design, so Rolf, your baby, during the design of the new project, which we call now ECOFISH, these were really taken into account. So ECOFISH, in the design of the ECOFISH, there were 5 results that we were supposed to meet. One is the increase in fish biomass across the project sites, similar as fish. But the rest of the other results that we were expect to meet were entirely dedicated towards the equity that we hoped would be shared by much of our fishers. increasing the number of people gaining employment or better employment from sustainable fisheries management, institute a national capacity development program to promote EFM, because during the FISH project, we introduced EFM, but in this resulting project, we're now trying to make EFM more or less copied all over the country. Enhance capacities of local government units in implementing EFM. So from that level, from that time on, we started working with our partners in the local government, doing a number of trainings such that EFM will become just a normal process in their management interventions. And last but not least, establish PPPs that support the objectives of ECOFISH. So Becky mentioned already 2 PPPs that we were really successful in, the TB White Space, and the other one is the 700 Daloy. There are a number of other PPPs that we were into. We invested on the experiment of using spawning potential ratio together with our partners, the PACP, which I think is affiliated with your NFI here, to improve the management of the blue crabs in the Philippines. And that is also through PPPP. So we have a number of other PPPs, the communal level of PPPs, about 100 of them as our target. And at this point, we're around the 80 mark. Anyway, so why EFM? This is now the direction wherein we are leading into. EFM, or Ecosystems Approach to Fisheries Management, is about managing fisheries at ecosystem scales, rather than the scales defined by jurisdictional boundaries. This is key in the Philippines. Our jurisdictional boundaries are the boundaries of our municipalities, which we call municipal waters. Our partners understand that the resources go beyond these municipal waters. And by doing EFM, that means it needs the working together of the various municipalities that share that common ecosystem. Second one is that addresses the sustainability of ecosystems and not just the sustainability of a particular species of fish. So we're looking here at the resource now at that level, wherein we are not just looking at a particular fish, but we're looking also at the food of that fish or what is eating that fish from that ecosystem perspective. And lastly, which is the key in any success of an EFM, is it provides governance mechanism for the selected spatial scale. So our intention is really to put our spatial scale in the same scale of our governance scale. Because if they are not congruent to each other, EFM will not succeed. That's the most, that's the hardest challenge of the project. So where we are now, these are the key indicators I selected from the number of indicators that we have for our project. During the midterm, around June, we look at all these indicators and to see where we are. And these are on the left, on your left are the performance indicator, and on the right are the percent accomplished. As you note, that almost all indicators are beyond 50% accomplished. So we have number of AFM training courses conducted, we have 57. Example, the number of policies, we have 88% already completed. It appears that we have somehow already went beyond the hill for the project. But unfortunately, I cannot say so, that we are already beyond the hill. If you look at here, the inter-LGU management plans, as well as the inter-LGU benchmarks that we are using, are still beyond 50%. That's the big challenge for the project. The big challenge for the project is that you have a resource that has to be managed at an ecosystem scale. So you must have a governance that has to also be used in that governance, in that ecosystem scale. And that's where we are now with our ECOFISH project. And I'm glad to, it may not be that, that easy to look at the project from this presentation alone, but let me show you a very typical example of what we're doing in the field. This is quite iconic now in how we implement project in the field. In this site, which we call the Verde Island Passage, there is a constant decline of the fish stocks and the harvest of the fishers. Fortunately or unfortunately, the fishers who came to us to ask for help are actually the commercial fishers, because they already feel that in their pockets. The constant reduction of their catch are also affecting them, their business. So they went to us and asked us what we can do to help. And one of those things that we thought of, together with them, was the seasonal closure of the fisheries. I don't know if Geofalls is already around, but during that time, when we started this, is that we have no idea when to close that particular area. We really don't have any idea. The only thing we know is that the closure of a fisheries would mean that more harvest in the future because more fish can reproduce. So that's what we are trying to target. So what we did is very simple. We met together with the commercial fishing operators, sat in a room, and asked their master fishermen to put up where they think the various species coded by the various colors are found during the spawning period. So they put these various dots there. And we also asked them what particular months are they really spawning. And they said it's between September to January. But if you ask them, can we close from September to January? Of course not. A lot of livelihood will be affected, not just their profit, but also the people working for them. So that's when we did our science. What we did is, together with the partners on the ground, we trained them to collect information together with the fishers, because they are the one giving us the fish as our source of data, to look at the gonads of the fish to find out which particular month we have the highest occurrence of pregnant fishes, you would say. The fishes with higher gonadosomatic index for that period. We provided the science, and with that, a series of consultation occurred, and finally, they decided to have a closed season during the month of December, wherein you see the most abundant stage 4, or what we call the gravid organisms during that month. It got into effect because our team provided the policy. That means went all around the 7 municipalities to provide them help on how to draft their ordinances. Our socioeconomic team provided support by asking the Department of Social Work to provide funds, because fishers will stop fishing during that time. And in effect, we had a very, very successful closed season last December 2014. We are going to see how its effect this year, so we will be starting to monitor that this year. And Mon is nodding, because some of this we have talked together with NOAA. And we will know by this year if really that closed season has a biological effect. But commercial effect, economic effect, has already been seen even as early as January 2015. So that's how we operate on the ground. That's the only way I can really relate to you what we are doing in our project, because the things that I said earlier are mere objectives and results. So with that, I'd like to say thank you.
Thank you very much, Nigel. That's how we operate on the ground. I like that. So we want to show you right now just a very short video clip that tells you a little bit about the award that ECOFISH received. As many of you know, it received the P3 Impact Award. And this award recognizes the leading public-private partnerships, PPPs, that are improving local communities in the world in impactful ways. The award was created by Concordia, the University of Virginia Darden School Institute for Business and Society, and the U.S. Department of State Secretary's Office of Global Partnerships. And it works to recognize and honor the leading best practices of public-private partnerships that are focused on improving communities and the world in very impactful ways. And what's very interesting is there was only one winner, and there were several hundred applicants. So it's quite an accomplishment. So this is, we're very proud of this award. I think Gina has the award in the coveted red box. Yes, so show it off.
Get out your telescopes here.
But we wanted to just share with you a little footage when the award was given, and then we'll have some time for question and answer and dialogue with the Becky and Nigel. So let's see the footage.
Hello, everyone, again, and I'm sorry I couldn't be with you in person to present this year's Public-Private Impact Award. I want to extend my deepest gratitude to Drew O'Brien and all of our finalists for their outstanding work. I expect that if I turned to almost any of you and asked, what's made this award so meaningful to so many, you'd probably point to Drew, and that's because he really understands what this effort is all about. From addressing the need for food security in sub-Saharan Africa to promoting entrepreneurship in Southeast Asia to lifting people out of poverty, no government can find and implement definitive solutions on its own. Treaties are negotiated by governments, but lasting peace and prosperity are created by people. That's why governments need to combine their strengths with those of the private sector and civil society. And it's why the State Department's Office of Global Partnerships has teamed up with Concordia and the University of Virginia's Darden School of Business on the Public-Private Impact Award. The goal of this award is as clear as it is compelling: to recognize and inspire the next generation of public-private partnerships, because the best ideas are never limited by borders, and we need all the good ideas that we can get. Believe me, that's not an argument, it's a simple statement of fact. And this year, I'm very pleased to announce that our Public-Private Impact Awardee is the TV White Space-supported Fisherfolk Registration Partnership. This partnership is drawing on unused television channels to make registration easier for fishing communities in the Philippines. It's also restoring the health of local ecosystems to produce more fish, feed more people, and create more jobs. That's the very definition of paying it forward, and it is giving new life to the old saying, teach a person to fish. As an industry, fishing is timeless, and so is the need for partnerships that bring us together in support of ideas that create shared prosperity and improve people's lives. So, a huge congratulations to this year's winner, and thank you to all of you who have participated, and keep up the terrific work.
So, Becky and Nigel. So I'd like to now open it up for discussion. Any questions? I have a couple of colleagues who are coming around with microphones, and I'll ask you to give your name and your affiliation as you ask your question or make your comment. So, see lots of smiles. Who would like to kick us off? Yes, please. The microphone is coming to you. If you can use the microphone, please. If you can use the microphone, please. It's being webcast. We want people to hear you. Thank you.
Yeah, I had the honor to work with closely with Nigel and Becky over the years. So we had CRM 7 years, and then thanks to the leadership of Ralph and Jerry Bisson, with Fish and ECOFISH. What's next?
You're asking me, or you're just asking me?
Are you asking me?
Let's see, and let's see if we take a couple questions while you think about what's next. Yeah, anyone else? Yes, please.
Thank you very much for a great presentation. Congratulations on the prize. My name is Alexander Kravitz. I'm a former diplomat from El Salvador. I had kind of a related question. Actually, it was to Gloria Steele, but have you thought of replicating this in some other country? That was the first question. To Dr. Armada, what other measures beyond the fishing season closure that you mentioned did the project use to increase the biomass in the harvest? And to you, Ms. Rebecca, you mentioned the increased registration of fishermen from something like 70,000 to about 1.5 million. I'm wondering if you could tell us how did the government of the Philippines cope with obviously a significant increase in demand for services? Thank you very much.
So Becky, what's next? Replication, let's increase demand.
Let me start with the first one, with regards replication. I think there were opportunities and there are continuing opportunities within the Coral Triangle Initiative in understanding and taking up the models on fisheries management that the Philippines is doing. In many ways, through a university course also, like the one that we helped set up at the University of the Philippines, we will be able to encourage and explain the nuances of this fisheries management model or models that we are doing in the Philippines. Overall, I think there is really no one approach that could solve all the fisheries problem. It's not a one shoe that will fit all of the fisheries problem, because in different situations there will be different ecological conditions as well as governance mechanisms in place. But the approach, the overall approach, this EAFM, is something that we continue to operationalize on the ground through our projects, and is something that's already taken up through the CTI, the Coral Triangle Initiative, and by the other countries within the Southeast Asian region. As for the second question, registration, first of all, I want to say that I think the increase in the registration of fisherfolk was very successful. The registration of 1.5 million fishers within a period of 1.5 years, less than 2 years. The reasons for that is that first, the national government through the Philippine Bureau of Fisheries set up an incentives system in place. So there was a competition among the municipalities to complete the registration. To clarify, it is not the task of the national government to register the fishers. It is the task of the municipal government to do that. And they were doing that on their own before FishR. But they were doing it in isolation of others. What FishR did was set up a national program that hastened the registration process. The process itself was also simplified. The forms were standardized, and they were putting it in one central database at the national government level. And so because of that incentive system in place, there was a competition as to the first 100 municipalities completing registration will receive 1 million pesos in prize in terms of livelihood support. So the BFAR, the Bureau of Fisheries, had that funds. And so the process was hastened. As to how government will cope with all the services, I think the Philippine government has the resources. It has just been always the case that the fishers were not part of the picture because they were invisible. They were not part of any database. So in case there is, for example, an oil spill, the Department of Social Welfare and Development have the funds to provide to those that are affected, but they don't know, they don't have a list. They have to go through a longer process of setting up a list of who the municipal or who are affected in the community, including the municipal fishers. With the FishR registration in place and the database ready, government can now have better access to the list of people who are municipal fishers who happen to be the poorest of the poor in the country.
Yeah. For the first question about replication, I think in our own way, we have led, I think, the region in terms of the marine protected area as well as the network of marine protected area, and that is done through simple publications as well as presentations in workshops. That's where we are really also leading in terms of replication. I think the second one on the other management initiatives, aside from the seasonal closure, marine protected area and networks of marine protected area play a big role. It plays not only as the management per se, but also it is also a laboratory where people really learn how to manage. Because if you see the improvement you get from marine protected area, you can't help but become the believer in management. So it's acting for us both as an actual management measure, but at the same time as a laboratory for people to really learn how to manage the fisheries. There are other things, like, for example, the selection of what gear to use. And ultimately, what we intend in the Philippines is what we call, or what we intend really to address the elephant in the room. All the management intervention so far that has been done in the country and even in the region has led to, from here, there, can lead to increases in biomass, increases in harvest. But still, your fishing effort keep also on increasing. So the ultimate goal really of fisheries management, which I've been advocating even in our Tetra Tech company, is really the right sizing of fishing effort. And the right sizing of fishing effort means mainly that you allocate the appropriate fishing effort for an appropriate type of fisheries. And that's what we are leading into. We use a number of technologies for this, right? Like modeling, ecological modeling, and a number of things that can help us right-size our fishing effort. So we're leading that way. So I may be also answering also the question on where the future of this lies. Just to expound further on what Becky mentioned about the services, the deluge of services from this registration. There has been services all the time. Only it went to the wrong people. The same way with the equity issue. The fishers seems to be the least people to get that equality from government services. Like the case, for example, what Becky mentioned about the oil spill. After the oil spill, the government wants to provide livelihood or some kind of compensation for the people affected by the oil spill. So they have to be fishers. Once you start registering people because you don't have an original list, you will come up with tricycle drivers, barbers become fishers. And that's that has been repeated on and on from the past several decades in the country. Every time there is a disaster, a typhoon, everybody becomes fishers. So the government cannot provide that proper incentive to the right people, and that has been the issue ever since. So registration itself helped not totally solve the problem, but improve. We have improved on that.
Yes, please. Any other? Yes.
Yes, an excellent set of presentations. Mike Roth from Tetra Tech. I'm interested in this question of equity. You knew the issue was the larger fishers were taking advantage of the larger fish stocks, and that the poorer fishers were not. I understand that TV white space was used to help identify instances of overfishing. There were also benefits provided to poorer fishers. My question is, how did you help poorer fishers to become more efficient, to take advantage of increased fish stocks? Was it simply a matter of controlling the offtake by larger fishers at the top, or were you also putting in place programs that help poorer fishers become more efficient fishermen, maybe even moving some fishermen out? I'm just wondering whether you could expand on that thinking just a bit. I don't know who's the best position to ask.
I think it's all of what you are saying. First of all, is this. Registration of fisher folk is just knowing your universe, who they are. When you do intervention, fisheries management intervention, it goes beyond just registration. You have to put in place measures. You have to see to it what are the appropriate fishing gears that are to be used in those areas. And most of all, you have to remove that competitor who in the first place are not supposed to be there. Because in our case, commercial big boats are not supposed to be in those areas based on our law. We have the local government code, which actually only allows the small-scale fishers to operate in those municipal waters, and the commercial fishers fishing there are actually intruding into this municipal fishers. So knowing that from the previous project that we had, we now enhance our capacity to control. So enforcement, and the TV white space, it just hastened the use of the technology for the people to be registered. So registration per se is not management. It is just knowing your universe. And knowing your universe can provide you with further work in your interventions.
All right.
Yes, please.
Microphone.
Thank you for the presentation, Matthew Edwardson with Tetra Tech. I really enjoyed the linkages that you made between a biodiversity program and ending extreme poverty. And I was wondering if you could maybe expand a little bit. You just did, Becky, on some of your comments about how the government can now access these individuals. But what are some of the metrics that you're applying to kind of make that causal linkage? And how can we explain that a little bit better with numbers? And especially now that AID just released their new, their new fancy brochure on this topic.
Was it fancy? First, to explain that the ECOFISH project is funded by Biodiversity Fund. And so its scope of work and its goals are intended to be for a biodiversity project. But the situation is that we are working with the extreme poor in the Philippines, which happens to be the fisher folk. There are only two sectors in the Philippines who are considered extreme poor. They are the coconut farmers and the fisher folk, living below the poverty line, about close to 50% of them. As of now, the metrics are more on the biodiversity conservation piece. So the connection to the extreme poverty situation is something that still needs to be worked on. So I don't have any specific metrics right now on that regard, but that's something we are thinking about and maybe doing in the next few months. It's the biodiversity conservation piece, the metrics of that. That's the one that's really more spelled out at this point. I think at some point our socioeconomic work, because one of the things that ECOFISH is doing is helping set up community enterprises. That's where we can expound a little bit on that equity, socioeconomic piece. The benchmarks that ECOFISH is using right now is like 1 to 17 indicators. And the institutional and the socioeconomic part of that one is still maybe 1 of those 17. So we're still in the process of expounding that. But thank you for raising that question.
Yeah. And maybe from the point of view of having a baseline with our own small scale in the ECOFISH project, we're collecting the baseline, so there are ways of comparing that towards the end of the project.
Gina, did you have a question?
Yeah, I have a question. Gina, if you all know me, Gina Green with Tetra Tech. Sorry, Gina Green with Tetra Tech, project manager for ECOFISH. First of all, thank you guys. You've done an absolutely brilliant job, and I've really explained ECOFISH. One thing I'd like to have you mention or talk a little bit is about the team and the makeup of the team and who's doing what and sort of the values that the team plays in the field.
Okay. We really have a very thinly distributed team. We have 8 project sites. So in each of our projects, we have a site coordinator with an assistant. We call them the community relations specialist. And in our technical team, we have 4 key personnel. We have, of course, the chief of party, the deputy chief of party, who is also at the same time have an overview or oversight of the enforcement. He's an enforcement guy. And we have a governance specialist, we have a socioeconomic specialist, and practically we have a PPP specialist. So that's how thinly we are distributed. And we work our way through 8 of these sites along the process of the project implementation. So that's how the team is. What else?
Yes,
Anne.
Thank you. Hello, Anne Mooney with NOAA. Hi, guys. So just wondering a little bit on with the fish R. So that's that's looking at registering fisher folk themselves. And Nigel, you mentioned also gears. And okay, so is there capabilities within it to expand to some of those other metrics like gears or vessel registration or perhaps even like landing data or anything like that? Does that allow for that sort of expansion since it's set up and super successful already?
Yes. The FISH-R is registration of all fisher folk as defined by the 1998 Fisheries Code. So it includes not only those that do actual fishing, but also those that are involved in aquaculture, those that are selling fish, and so on and so forth. And so the FISH-R form includes information on the person involved, the fisher, plus some additional information on the gear that they use. There is an accompanying program on registration called BOAT-R. As you guess, it's about the registration of boats and gears. And so that one is the next step, and in fact is already rolling out in different places in the country. So now there's the FISH-R and the BOAT-R simultaneously being done in different places in the country.
So in terms of what project intends to do with those, it's really the licensing of fishing operation, because that's where the fishing effort comes in. A person registered under FISH-R who is just selling fish does not really put pressure on the sea, but the person who is catching fish puts pressure on the sea. So that's why the licensing is a key element that we have to further develop in this project, and we have started developing that already.
So, Becky and Nigel, I was quite intrigued. You talk a lot about the success and looking back to the FISH project and wanting to build on the winners and losers. And now that you are midway through this project, I wanted to ask you, is there anything that you feel you have learned now that you wish you knew at the inception of the project that would have provided benefits or economies of scale that would have made you advance even further now? And I'd like to hear this from a donor perspective and from a project implementation perspective. What are the lessons that you're learning now that I wish I knew that 2.5 years ago? Is that a fair question?
Fair.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I think the goals of EcoFish are ambitious. The 10% increase in fish biomass in 8 sites and the 10% increase in the number of new or better employment over a period of 5 years. Looking back, I think it's really ambitious. But I think the project can do it. But I now think that given additional more years, like I'm not saying I will give you additional years. I'm just saying that, you know, there is a gestation period that needs to be considered. So you target 8 strategic PPPs. It's not just about ticking the box and saying, yes, I've established the PPP. You look for PPPs that would have transformational results and impacts. And so there's that gestation period. What I'm happy about, of course, is the inclusion of the socioeconomics being from a social science background, because I think it's important. When we were together, and I see Joe is here now, Joe and I had the chance to do a paper together, and we presented the paper in the Philippines. And as I was listening to the speakers, they were talking about the decline in fisheries and the decline of resources and things like that. And I was telling Joe, have we even thought about the question, would there still be fishers in the coming years? Are we understanding our fishers the same way we are understanding our fish? So that's a bias on my part. That's my own opinion. But I think that, you know, we need to consider all that in looking at or in search for always improving our approach to solving the fisheries problem. It has to be a more comprehensive approach. And as I've said, maybe, you know, given a little bit more time for a gestation period for partnerships to really blossom and develop.
I think from my end is that the partnership targets are really also very, very ambitious, especially the community partnerships. Because in a community, in a community composed of small-scale fishers, what private partner can you really find? So that itself is really a very ambitious, you know, ambitious work, public-private partnership at the community level. That's ambitious. But we're trying hard. We're really, and we're working out well also there. The second one is the number 2 objective, which is increase in number of employment or better employment from sustainable fisheries. That means it's targeted only for sustainable. I think it should not be limited only to sustainable fisheries. There should be other boosting elements that should be placed in it, and we're doing it actually, but we recognize it only at I think after 1 year of the project. So it could have it been earlier, we could have also a good start. No? Heidi is smiling. So that's really that was really one of the things that we realized, because the term there limited us to increase in employment or better employment from sustainable fisheries, and we realize it's not enough. We realize now that we have to boost it to get other booster from other elements, like social. We have the other economic activities.
There is one more, maybe not a lesson, but something I'd like to emphasize, and I keep discussing with our EcoFish team. We're talking about socioeconomics, we're talking about better or new employment, and fisheries and the fishing industry is not just about the actual fishing. So we need to include women in our work, because we could work with women entrepreneurs in the community. We could work with women when we put assistance on some activities that would add value to your fish, because women is not in actual fishing, but in pre and post fishing activities. So this is still something we continue to do as the project progresses. We still have 2 more years to go.
Yes, please. We have a couple of questions at the back.
Joe and Heidi.
Hi, thanks. My name is Joe Foltz. I was recently in the Philippines, but I'm now here in USAID Legislative and Public Affairs. And one of the things I'd like to add to that from the donor perspective is what I wish we could have done at the beginning of the project is started with a theory of change. I think the theory of change as a framework for a way of thinking about these kind of dynamic processes that are not static has been a huge additional positive to project design that we didn't use before and that we haven't had. And it's not just in projects like ECOFISH. You see the theory of change being used in the Vision for Ending Extreme Poverty paper that PPL had just published. So that's a very powerful tool that we have retrofitted into ECOFISH, but I think at the outset would have probably pushed us further to be able to adaptively manage, I suppose. So I would just like to add that perspective. Thank you.
I think we had another hand.
Hello, my name is Heidi Schutenberg, also with USAID. And thank you so much for braving the cold to come be with us from the warmth of the Philippines. Sorry that it got cold the week before you arrived. We apologize. But working at AID, you know, we cite your program and its predecessor a lot as a success, as that this is possible. And so as we're thinking about, and I was hearing about an example in the Caribbean just this afternoon, which is trying to apply some of your principles, as you think about how to take what you've learned and then apply that to other places, I wonder if there are a couple key things that sit with you as being really the most important underlying factors to being able to have the positive change that you have in comparison to so many other projects. It's probably just the quality of the staff, but if there's anything else that might be, you know, transferable. Oh, and USAID, right, okay.
I think one important element, and I've seen this in the way ECOFISH work and when FISH was being implemented before. In your fisheries management approaches, the consultation part is very important. Because there are so many players in the fisheries sector, you need to have that strong consultation process. So I think Nigel said something about it when they were doing the close season, and that was demonstrated there as well. So you need to hear the voices. It has to be inclusive and participatory. That's one important. And the second one for me will be in terms of the governance. Because even if you understand the ecological conditions and science provided you with as much information possible on the ecological conditions and the ways forward to be able to improve it, you need to consider what governance mechanism is actually possible. And to, as he said, match it. The matching of what works at the governance scale, at what scale that will work, you try to do that. Because if you don't do that, I think you can have all the science in this world, but there will be no one who will implement it and follow the rules.
Okay, yeah, actually, I'm almost I will be saying the same. I've been advocate always of what I mentioned earlier of the right sizing. But in this case, in Heidi's question is this. We always, when you talk about any interventions, management interventions or initiatives, there is always that demand for scaling up. But that's not the right way to go. The right way to go is right scaling. There is always that level wherein even if you increase your scale, it will no longer work. So the right scaling is also another advocacy that we use in the FISH and ECOFISH project. We go beyond, we cannot go beyond a scale that wherein your governance no longer work. So your ecosystem should be in the same scale of your governance system, but they both together will be in the right scale. And that's the way I think that we can share with whatever Caribbean countries will be doing. Right scale.
Those of us from the Caribbean are very glad to hear that. So, Joe, I think we were going to call on you for some thoughts on the project, and would you like to offer some of your reflections on the project? Sure.
Check. Well, thank you to the Wilson Center and Tetra Tech and USAID for hosting this important event. We're here to celebrate. First and foremost, we've taken quite a technical dive into environmental security and into ECOFISH in the Philippines, but we're really here to celebrate an award that is given for impact. And that's what this project represents, is an actual impact. We're beyond dollars and cents, and we're beyond the project outputs and even outcomes. We're squarely in an example of what the new approach to development and financing literally means. And that is something that's centered on innovation as represented by the partnerships in this award, but it's also represented in the domestic resource mobilization that has occurred through the partnership this project fostered. Now, that wouldn't have been possible if it weren't for our predecessor, Rolf Anderson, who ran the office, and several others before him. This is really a legacy award that recognizes that, and it comes at a very auspicious time with the adoption of the Sustainable Development Goals last week, wherein you saw our top-line messaging. One of those key elements was this new approach to development and financing. So first of all, I'd just like to take my hat off to Becky and Nigel and the rest of the team that have seen marine conservation through its evolution from CRMP and before, really, to where we are today. That's not to say that this is good enough, because we're already looking forward to what's happening next. We know there are huge mega trends that are happening. We know that Asia is urbanizing at an incredible rate. There is a huge demand, an increasing demand for fish-based protein, which already forms a vast majority of dietary protein in the Philippines. And we know that the climate is changing. Indeed, as Secretary Kerry and the rest of the Our Oceans Conference group meets in Chile this week, we see those themes that we had last year: climate change, pollution, overfishing reoccurring. And that's not for for convenient reason. That's because these are real issues that are going to define this system's viability in the future. So as we look ahead and look forward to what's next, we have a lot of great experience to build on, and I hope we can retain all of the great staff that we have in the field. I'd love to go back to the Philippines and work again for as long as I could, but Washington beckons. So, so with that, I'd just like to say thank you once again, congratulations, and look forward to working with all of you in the future on projects like this.
So I think, Becky and Nigel, you talked about those butterflies in the stomach. You got them all into formation. What a great event. So Jane Harmon, who's the president and CEO of the Wilson Center, describes us as an intellectual candy shop where you don't get fat on spin. And this is what I like about this kind of event. I think it's really fascinating that we started the event today by talking about the reality of life in the Philippines. I mean, you heard this from Gloria, you heard this from what you both said. Fishing is a way of life in the Philippines. Storms are a way of life in the Philippines. Climate change and its impact is part of the reality. And inequities are something that we know that we have to deal with on the ground in the Philippines. And I think through the project, you talked about what are the different approaches to addressing this. So you talked a lot about partnerships, science, and advocacy. And I think in that discussion, there were 3 key points that I think really came out as you are learning your lessons. So looking at the role of technology and innovation, I think, Becky, it was quite compelling. This $700 Deloitte project, you talked about citizenship, the fact that citizens had to pay a peso to report this crime, and you talked about the economic benefits of that reporting. So looking at the ripple effects, the economic effects, and how this is being driven by innovative technologies that are really engaging citizens and making a difference on the ground. So a fascinating story there. I think the point that kept coming up about governance, those of us who work in the Philippines know that the Philippines is so decentralized. You talk about engaging the local government units and what that means to thinking about governance, but also right-sizing governance and what this means. So I think a really important question about governance and how can we learn from those lessons in other island settings, but in also other ecosystems and what that means. And I think a final point about scale. This question, we talk so much about getting to scale, scaling up, and now embracing right-sizing, and what does that mean? And what does that mean with our governance model? So I think that was all very informative for me. The no-spin part was we don't have all the answers, right? We have some of the winners and losers from a very successful fish project. And as donors and program implementers and international development practitioners, we're looking to learn how we can have the best impact on the ground. So we get these wonderful awards, and we want to celebrate. And what do we do with that? How do we, it's an honor and it's a privilege, but it's also a responsibility. So how do we embrace that responsibility and move it forward? And I think you talked about that. You talked a little bit about learning and replication and where we go next. I think there were important lessons there. A really very important lesson that I think, Becky, you made from the question on matrices. So you have that this is biodiversity funding that supports this work, but at one level you're trying to get to inequities. So how do you report on that in a very siloed way? If we have to work within a USAID administration and structure, you have to report on those biodiversity indicators, but how do you get to these cross-cutting issues on equity that are so important for integration? So I like the fact that we're celebrating, but there isn't too much spin there. We're recognizing the challenges, and there's an opportunity for real learning. So that was fantastic. Great. So now we're going to celebrate even more. So please stay with us. We have a little reception for us to continue the dialogue. So as you just step out here, we have some refreshments and hors d'oeuvres. So please stay and continue the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, awesome. Did you give me your card? Make sure, because I wanted, as I talked to Ricky Hernandez and Joanne Castro, you know,
yes.
They're my best friends. I do a lot of